we are going to get into our main topic here, dealing with intra-party conflict. The groups that I've worked with, we haven't had a lot of intra-party conflict. And so I really wanted some other people who have experience, wisdom, etc. to offer. I do have one story that I'm going to start with. When I was 9 or 10, first playing D&D with my brother and another pair of brothers, my character died. And then my brother asked the DM, is there any way to resurrect Joel's character? And he said, yes, there's a fountain of resurrection, but it's 3 days away. And my brother was like, no, that takes too long. I'm going to cut off his head. So he rolled the d20 and cut off my head. My character was like dead. No hope of resurrection. Well, I, being a 9 or 10-year-old, a little bit of a whiner, I yelled out my brother's name, and our parents caught wind of it, and they're like, yeah, okay, that game's done. You guys aren't doing this anymore. 30 years later, we're now in a DM group, and my brother's character was killed by a Strahd. And I checked with the DM, is there any way to resurrect him? And he said, no. Not as far as you know. We don't have any spells. We hadn't met the abbot, which is one way to do that, possibly. I'm like, well, I chop off his head. So it all came full circle, and it all worked out. My 10-year-old self was vindicated through that.
Oh, yeah.
But, when I check on Facebook, there are a lot of horror stories about groups and why they disband and the issues that they have. We're just going to explore that idea a little bit tonight. So, like I said, we might be dealing with some sensitive material. Just be aware of that as well. But I want to start off by thinking about what are the in-game origins of conflict? What kinds of things happen in-game that create an issue? Maybe let's start. Connor, do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
You know what? Depending on the group, it can be pretty different, right? As far as like what sorts of things cause conflict. Some groups, it could be argument over which snacks to bring. Other groups, it could be an argument about or a disagreement about what campaign to play or who's going to get to play the rogue this time. The answer is everybody gets to play the rogue, but whatever. I just in the games that I run, oftentimes when there is any sort of intra-party conflict, that intra-party conflict is over the sorts of expectations I might cover in a session 0. It's over, let's try to be on time. It's over, putting everybody's fun as a priority, not just yours, or those sorts of things, or that topic gets a really close to something that we lined or veiled off. So those are the sorts of discussions in my games that normally get the hit, but your mileage may vary.
Yeah, they're definitely out of game things like, as DMs, I'm sure we can all relate to that one person who texts us way too late that, oh, I can't make it tonight. There definitely are out of game issues that, one person can just come in with the wrong mindset. And one of the points you brought up there, Connor, was the importance of session 0. Like, this is the kind of game we're going to play. To set those expectations out. We covered that topic 2 weeks ago. That was a good group too. But so important because, at least on Facebook, almost every time someone said, my group is bullying apart because of this, you read it and right away think, did you have a session 0? Because I can almost guarantee you didn't. And that would have been covered. So what kind of in-game issues might cause some sort of conflict?
I'm pretty sure Kevin's going to agree with me on this one. He's probably seen this one a couple times. The one of the oldest ones that I've seen, because I've been doing this for a little while, is the rogue that stabs the party while they're asleep and steals their gold. It's what my character would do. I want the gold. They've got the gold, so they got to go. that sort of thing. They're playing to a character type. Maybe they've even got a really good reason why their character does. Maybe they were wronged or something like that. That's going to set off a bomb.
Yeah.
That's inter-party conflict that is almost classic for the game. But you also see kind of reflections in that in other things. The rogue that goes ahead, pops the chest or the trap or whatever, gets to the treasure, and they say, what do I see? Okay, I'm going to pocket it.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not affecting a character directly at that point. They're being greedy. That's even built into some of the ideals and traits in D&D Modern now. So it's still one of those things. Treasure is always going to be a hot button topic. You always see people wanting the shiny sword, wanting the gold coins, wanting that figurine of wondrous power. Whatever it is, there's only one of them, and someone's going to fight over it. That's the big one I see.
Oh, yeah. So, oh my goodness, I'm going to jump in. My biggest, somebody asked on Twitter, what's the one thing that somebody could say during a game that tells you this probably isn't the right game for me to play in? And my number one thing was, well, it's what my character would do to describe anything that a jerk would do.
Yeah. Well, your character's a jerk, and I hate to break it to you, but you're a jerk.
So are you.
Play them somewhere else.
Yeah, any moment when you look at them and you want to ask the question, what frat did you just get vomited out of? That's unacceptable behavior.
Kevin, what about you?
I was going to actually go with the I pocket that out of the chest thing. That is the trope, right? That goes back to the first chest that was ever opened by the first rogue in the first game in 1970, whenever it was, right? But the one that I watch for is the bleed, the character to player bleed.
Yeah.
Because my character steals from your character is not the same as I steal from you. And I know when we were teenagers playing in my basement, that was really hard to remember. And the only reason we didn't get in fistfights a couple times is because we were all nerds and we knew it wouldn't work. I'm not going to, that's just not going to be an effective way to solve this. But yeah, that's a big one for me, is making sure that doesn't bleed. Because I'm not 100% against inter-party conflict, like Legolas and Gimli. That is a beautiful story against this horrible background of what else is going on in that story at that point. But the two of them going from enemies to friends it's a great story. It can only happen because of that tension. But it's got to be carried out by people who can play the parts and not be, personally affected by it. So.
Kyle, any experience that you have from in that?
I have never seen nor been a part of any kind of conflict in my life. I don't know why I'm here.
You're here because of the beard, because I love that beard.
Right. That's right. This is my golden ticket to the entire TTRPG community. I wanna create that differentiation that you started, Kevin, between what I consider good intra-party conflict and bad intra-party conflict. Like, we've got in one of my current campaigns, we've got two characters, Gruna and Gorf. Gorf is a barbarian. He really wants to protect everybody. Gruna is super impulsive, and so Gruna will run into rooms while Gorf is trying to create a strategy to face whatever's in that room, and there will be this fabulous butting of heads as Gruna's like, "Don't you tell me what to do!" And it's lovely. But that is characters, getting into conflict because of their person, because of the character's personality. And it turns into either funny or really, soulful moments, and it's great. The one that I've actually had with the bad ones, the one that I've actually had the most trouble with are with clerics and paladins, who are like, "Oh, well, my god says that you can't do this thing," and it's an attempt to control everyone. But it's part of it is that bleed that's happening, where it's whatever's happening in that player's life at the moment, they're gonna shove that in there. We had a cleric of a lawful good god threaten to cut off another player's head and mount it on her temple wall if didn't do what she wanted. And I was like, so you might lose your powers if you ever do that again.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, depending on the god. The other thing with bleed is it can work both ways too, right? Somebody can show up at the table having had a really miserable day, and without even realizing it, they just start taking it out on the game and everybody that's sitting with them because they haven't had a chance to decompress. So that can, like I said, it works both ways through that. What's supposed to be a wall, I mean, when you're doing it right, it isn't one, right?
Sure. The players bring things to the character, and then the players also take on the character. And that's, I mean, that idea of character bleed is such an important part of it. Like that's part of the beauty of the game, is that you get emotionally invested, but at the same time you have to be able to say, but it's a game.
Right?
Yes. Well, I think actually the best thing that you can do, the one that I've had the most success with, is really asking a player, would your character actually do that? Like, based on behaviors that your character has exhibited previous to this, even maybe in this session. This seems like we're going directly against what you just told your companions, or this action that you took, or this choice that you made. Why don't you explain to me the mental gymnastics that we are going through right now in order to get you here? And typically they'll be like, oh, and you move on. And you don't like hold them. You don't hold them down and scream at them, stop it. It's just, okay, then we're moving along.
Yeah.
We discovered another thing we called the 2-second check-in too. If you just did a really intense scene with somebody at the end of it, you just, like, at a table, it can just be like, we're good, okay, and then move on, right? Just that split second to make sure that nobody's taking it personally and it hasn't crossed that barrier.
Before I start a session, it's something that I do in as a DM, but also something I do as a therapist. Is I'll stop and say, okay, before we get started today, where are you at right now? Everybody at this table in a good place to enjoy some D&D, and open up that conversation before we even get into the game. Like, let's figure out where you're at right now, because if your headspace isn't in the right space to enjoy this game, why don't you tell me? Like, I'm not gonna be hurt. We can take a second to talk about it. We can take a break real quick. I can change the subject matter to make it lighter or less emotionally demanding of you. We just need to have that communication.
Transparency is so key, and honesty and trust in each other when you're playing something that it does, like we were saying before, when it becomes so personal, you have to have that knowledge that you are playing in a situation that you feel respected and trustworthy, etc., all that.
I was going to say with that, we have a policy at all of our streams and all of our tables, and it goes against what a lot of people think, but the way that I put it is, if you're not up to it today, just let me know.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. You don't need to tell me why. You will not be judged. You will not be thrown out of next week's show. You will not be kept off of lists for future shows. And I don't care how many times you do it. If we do a 10-week session and you can't show up for 8 of them, I don't hold that against you. Ever. You can call me with 30 seconds before we go live. And I go, okay, I'll fix the camera. See you next week. But there is zero judgment. And that is a key thing, because you know what? This is a hobby, right? This isn't anybody's job. And if it makes you uncomfortable to play, then don't play today.
To kind of piggyback off that, even if it is a job, even if streaming is the career that's going on, you don't want to necessarily bring someone on that's going to have that problem. And that's a lowercase problem, not like an uppercase problem. It's just, if you're not having a good day, sit it out. Don't ruin your day by dragging yourself into something that's hard. And if it is a professional setting, mental health days are a thing for a reason. We got to take a step back, say, hey, this is just not a good time for me to do this activity. I'm going to sit it out. That way I'm not bringing that to the situation.
I would give a tiny bit of pushback on that. Just if the example that you used, like if you do a 10-week session and someone doesn't show up for 8 weeks, at that point, I probably will not invite them to come back, because at that point, my assumption is there is something wrong with the relationship between them and my table. You know, like that, there's something going on that is a block for them. And whether they want to discuss it or not, I won't force them to discuss it or anything. But if they're actually, because for me, it is in fact important that there be repercussions for things, that actions have consequences. And if you are inconveniencing the entire table, which is what you're doing, if you call 30 seconds before the game's supposed to start and you're not going to be there, that there should be some sort of repercussion for that. Not anything like major, but I then have to make a choice as a DM. Am I going to put my players through that again, where we're all expecting to have 6 players in the party, but instead we only have 5, and that makes everything much more difficult. And we've got a storyline that included, this guy, and he's not here for that entire storyline. Things like that. I appreciate the concept of it, but I think that there's, in reality, like, there are very few situations where I personally would accept just a carte blanche. Oh, okay. All right, that's fine.
And now we have conflict.
Yeah.
This makes perfect sense. No, it makes perfect sense to me. We did in the intros. What type of GM are you?
Yeah,
Or a lawful GM, I would chaotic, right? So it makes sense that you would apply the rules, and I'm like, out the window. Let's tell the story with 3 people.
Fine.
But the thing is, there is absolutely challenges to that, especially for people like Connor was mentioning earlier, who are running an Adventurers League campaign. You cannot, I don't think you're allowed to sort of edit content to peel it down. Like to
yes, you can.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Oh, yes, you can.
Yes. Okay. So theoretically, I don't think it's either way. It's harder in some instances than the same if you're running a module. If they're going into a fight against a dragon today and there's only 4 of them instead of 6, there's an issue. Our rule in most of our tables is half plus 1. If half plus 1 show up, we play.
Sounds like
so in a 4-person team, if 3 people show up, we play. And I adjust on the fly to make up for what needs or needs not to happen for the fight. But again, not the only way to do it, and I absolutely get it. There are people out there who would take advantage of that.
Let me be very clear. If it happens once, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
If it happens once or twice, it's not a huge issue. I'm talking very specifically about extended periods where
I'm the one that said 8 out of 10.
Go by.
So, absolutely. And I'm actually in that situation right now. And their box is still there on the overlay. I now use it for chat for weeks that they don't show up. I put the chat window in there. And that's when they show up, they'll be in the story, and when they don't, they won't. And the only thing I would add to that too is we stream, and sometimes I know I used to perform on stage. Stage fright can hit you at the last second, and it can be absolutely like throwing up, bent over on the floor, debilitating.
Yeah,
and I don't want to ever have anybody explain to me why they can't come. Because I would hate to make that call, like look up at the stage and go, I know you just introduced me, but I just threw up in my shoes. I can't go on tonight. Right. So, yeah. But absolutely, yeah, consequences. Yeah, there are certainly some people who would take advantage of that. But
yeah. Well, and you guys have all touched a little bit on a point about how can we be proactive about it. And I know that Session 0 is part of it, establishing, how Session 0 is probably, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but I'd guess that would be the biggest way to establish, here's how things are going to go, here's how we're going to deal with, ninja loot and stuff like that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
In my groups, for instance, we tend to have every character is carrying some of the gold, but then there's also a bank that they share. And so, if you need 50 gold to go buy their armor, you don't have to ask for the bank. Go ahead and do that. You've got enough. But if it's like, there's something else that costs 1,000, well, now it becomes a group thing that you have to work on. But once again, that's something that we kind of established early on, because I just found that way you avoid, bickering over, well, why do you need 15 gold? Well, I need 5. That kind of thing. It's
I'm out of
I only got
arrows.
10 last week, so now you owe me 5.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly. Because
gosh.
I had one player in one group who, anytime another player would ask, I'd need to, exactly that soul, I need to buy arrows, but I have no gold. And the other guy's like, well, what do you give me for it? It's like, just,
my God.
just give
Oh,
him
no.
the 2 gold or whatever it is to get
Come
some arrows.
on.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. We had those conversations when, like I said, when I was 16 and in high
Right.
school with my nerdy friends, and
Yeah.
it was, the first time any of us had any real power, even though it was fantasy power. So we were damn well going to abuse it.
Right.
Yeah.
We killed everybody in every town. I mean, I was running the games. I built the towns, and then I DM NPC'd because nobody else would DM, so I DM NPC'd. So we would just brutally mow through towns that I built. But yeah. Teenager D&D.
There's also just that concept that it's like I could totally see a character doing that and it being a delightful moment in the campaign because they used to be a merchant or something like that, and this is how they understand the world, that it's transactional and they have to do this with everything. But developing that or developing out of it or developing into it, like whatever it is. But the ones that just go full Karen on things because God,
it's a bit much. Are there certain things that you'd say, like, so do we talk about loot? Do we talk about alignment? For instance, do you say, you know what, we're not going to have evil characters in this? I know that when I've played with kids, when I've DM'd for groups of kids, I'll say, you were either neutral or good. The other parts of it, chaotic, lawful, you decide. But chaotic doesn't mean you get to be a jerk whenever you want.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a chaotic good is different from, chaotic evil, obviously. But, so what kinds of things in particular would you establish, alignment, etc.?
The obvious stuff like lines and veils, what topics are going to be off subject, that way we're not having that outside group stuff, always important. But those inside questions, like you're asking about, like alignments, races, classes, even would be a thing to pin down, because some people really want to play one class and one class only, and you kind of have to establish that at session 0 because it's before characters are made. You have to figure out, okay, yeah, Jim really only plays rogues. It's all they're comfortable playing. They haven't played anything else in the 20 years they've been gaming. They're not about to change. So let's just let Jim play the rogue, man. Stuff like that. Anything that's going to come up with loot distribution, even things like note taking. That's kind of out of party, but I know a lot of players, or at least I've known a lot of players throughout the years, that their character actually takes the notes. They have a travel journey, or maybe they're the bard and they're making these songs. If you've got a character and a player who's doing that, do we need the other players to also take their notes? What's the distribution of effort there? So things like that are kind of important that come up. What do you guys think?
Oh, I definitely think that it's important to sort of establish some of that. I found that when it comes to like note taking and stuff, some of that will just sort itself out organically. Like you will find people that are much more comfortable with that, and you can learn to sort of lean on them a little, and then sort of try to usher the characters towards that, so that, because there's always going to be that one in the party that's just like, what happened 3.5 minutes ago? What did we do?
I just built that into my character. So
Yeah,
I have this one character in Theros who's he just wants to be the hero. He's a satyr or swashbuckler. Satyrs are often like fun-loving and goofy, but he wants to come across as a tough guy. And so whenever there's too much, and my DM is here in the chat, so I shouldn't say too much. But whenever we have these sessions that involve a lot of, narrative, etc., I'm sorry, I kind of cover up that my character is out of it because I might not be paying attention like I should be. I'm sorry, Rob.
So yeah, things like races, I guess, would be in there too. Like, if you do have those races that are just kind of maybe not, yeah, that's a subject too. Kyle, you said something that I kind of wanted to ask you about. You mentioned that the note taking you wanted to kind of evolve organically. I'm kind of opposed to that. I kind of think it's better to set it on session 0. What experiences kind of lead you to make that choice?
Well, I think there's actually a lot to be said for a party where no one takes the notes, because then they don't know what. Well, I've actually had a lot of fun, because what I make my parties do, if you haven't taken the notes, is you roll an intelligence check to see if you remember what happened. Because I've got, as the lawful good DM, I've got all the notes. Like I literally have like the thing that we're playing right now. The third level of this temple, there was 13 pages of just, traps, descriptions, like everything, mainly because I will improv a bunch of stuff and then forget. So after the session, I need to pop it into the notes. So I'm like, okay, this is lore now. This is canon. All right, here we go. But I think it is and maybe it's just because apparently I really am just lawful evil. I love watching my characters because they didn't take notes, struggle to figure out what the hell's going on, and then I'm like, okay, all right, anybody, intelligence check, and they're like, oh god, it's like, you remember that once there was a donkey. Wait, what?
Somehow a donkey was important.
Is your dump stat.
I can't remember. But on that, do you kind of preface your game with like, hey, if no one's taking notes, this is how we're going to resolve it, or do you just kind of like surprise?
So the way I preface all of it is that I like my world to have integrity. There will be consequences to everything you do. There's consequences. One of my players actually put it perfectly. He's like, any character can punch the world that Kyle made, but that world will punch you back. And it's like, if you learn real quick, you better take some notes, because I like complex, interesting, like puzzles and situations where you did this thing. Because you did this thing in session 3, I'm going to create a whole scenario in session 8 where that information is now going to come back, so that there's a payoff to what, like, it's not just, oh, there was a street sign in session 3 that had a weird name, and if you don't remember it, no, it's like, there's this character, you interacted with her, it went terribly, and now 5 sessions later, there's a whole thing going on because of it, and you need to remember what you said. So it's all in, the effort to, again, create the crucible for the characters so that they learn and they grow as characters, while at the same time creating a situation where I can still have, a lot of fun, watching my characters run around in circles without doing any like lasting damage to either the character or the player.
Okay. When we're going through our session 0, I've never actually addressed if somebody should take notes or somebody shouldn't take notes. I've always come through it with the, you're here to have fun. If you told me that for my game, one person was going to have to maintain an Excel spreadsheet, I would do everything I could not to be the person who had to do Excel, because that is not fun for me. And I'm not playing D&D to do something I find not fun. And for many people, taking notes is something they might have to do at their job, and it's something they find incredibly frustrating, and it's not their idea of a great time. And so they don't want to do that. When I run my sessions, I never require anybody to take notes, but we start every game with a flashback sequence, just like a serial television show. Like, let's go through, and it's collaborative. I'll go over the notes I have, but I'm going to miss things that are important to you. Why don't you interject with things that happened that were also important to you? We collaboratively put it together. Then I put on their credit sequence, because I have a credit sequence for the games I run.
Yeah.
And they get their theme song and their credits, and then
Yes, you
we
do.
start playing.
Okay, I want to play in one of your games because that
Right?
sounds pretty wicked.
I got a theme song?
Yeah,
Oh, I think he just wants to play my games because I don't have Excel spreadsheets in them.
Yeah.
probably. Yeah, that too.
I ran a Corsairs of the Cosmos game where all the major NPCs had theme music that played every time they appeared. It was great fun.
Nice.
It was annoying to run, but it was great fun.
I imagine.
Yeah.